Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Mob Psycho 100, Season 2, Episode 8. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we pick up with Masato. Obviously, it turns out the cult or religious group that supports Mob has grown. They have their own building and everything. It turns out because they got a mysterious anonymous donation. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that's the case from episode 4 and 5. The girl, if I remember correctly, the episode had ended with her and her dad finding that cult that was the religious group. I keep calling them a cult. They weren't a cult, then they became a religious group, but they still kind of stayed cultish. But basically, she found the page and decided to help out Mob in that regard and donate it to this group that supports Mob. So that's where that comes. I think they're the mysterious donors. And Masato's whole point on this, it's oh my god, the group is kind of aimless. They don't really have any scripture. No one really knows what they're doing. But she's the moment Mob reveals himself, things are going to go crazy. And her reasoning for this is because it would be fun. That's her only. I think it's also because as a reporter, she wants to report on something probably big like that. Because remember early on in the season, she was making the whole point of she just wants Mob to be in a better position so that he can take his rightful place as a leader of this group. But where he is now, he wasn't really ready for that. Either way, there is a marathon that's happening at the school and everyone has to participate. And I love the teacher being none of you faking being sick either. I've got eyes on all of you, so you better go see this through. And so Masato wants to talk to Mob, and it's and Dimple being oh, maybe she wants to confess to you. He was no, she probably just wants to talk to me about something. He's oh my god, Mob. The fact of the matter is, you used to just trip every time, assuming that, oh, it's some girl trying to confess to you. But no, you've really grown. Oh my god, look how much you've changed. But when he actually gets to the roof and Masato is oh, you know about the marathon? He's oh, that's what you wanted to talk about. And then Dimple's wait, you did expect her to be something more? But yeah, she wants him to take the opportunity. It's because of the conference from last episode, they only saw him from behind, but in some of the footage, they saw Mob there. So they knew oh, what was going down there wasn't a fluke or some fake thing. It's oh, it's our leader, our person that we worship. And they could tell from his uniform that he goes to Salt Middle School, but they don't know who he is. So they're planning on showing up to Salt to look for him. And Masato's oh, why not present yourself to them in the most spectacular way, but blazing past everyone with your psychic abilities. But for Mob, it's no, I don't want to do that. I've trained really hard and I want to prove myself, because his goal is by next year, he wants to do the marathon next year. And well, you kind of have no choice, it's mandatory, but when he does the marathon next year, he wants to get 10th place, be in the top 10, because the moment he gets in the top 10, then he's going to ask Tsubomi out. And everyone's whoa, you're going to do that? But then Masato was we don't have we can't just wait till next year, because she's we won't have enough time with us having to take entrance exams for high school. And he's right. Because of that, he's right, we can't wait till next year. So I've got to make it this year. And he's made that declaration that he'll do it. He'll accomplish getting to the top 10 this year. And he goes and tells the telepathy club, and they're there's no way you're going to do that. And it's was it Tomei being what place did you make it in last year's marathon? He was 291st out of 300. You're wow. I was and what, no shade to him. I'm I would have never done any better. I guarantee you I would have been 300. So Mob's definitely got me beat in that regard. Even back in middle school, I definitely know I wouldn't have, so, but everyone's got their suggestions about what he should do, about what he should eat. And they're and Tomei's it's not a diet situation. Buy very specific running shoes. It's yeah, but he doesn't have the money for that. There was another suggestion that was thrown out there. The technique to running. He's that's not going to matter when he's slow. But then Onigawara shows up and he's yo, you got to basically, that's why you're our shadow leader. Kind of push everything aside. If this is what you want to do, you put your all in it and you do it. And he's some brand new shoes, and he gave him the Mob, and he's talking him up and being yeah, this is yours. you put them to good use. And it's like, oh man, it's such a sweet, honorable moment. And then like Musashi's like, hey, those are the shoes Onigawara ordered that were too small. And Tomi's just like, you could have just shut up. You didn't have to ruin this moment. So, but it didn't change anything. Even because I love that you have Dimple, because he's so proud of Mob. He's running around telling everyone. First, he tells Regan about what he's trying to do, and Regan's got a full calendar of meetings and stuff like that. But he's like, no. We probably don't even have that many customers or whatever, which kind of showcases, even in the backlash of everything, I guess because he kind of, well, even though it was Mob, like his name was kind of, his reputation was like saved. So now like all that clientele are back and probably even more people now, but his calendar looked full. And so, but he's brushing that off because for him, it's like, especially after the last 2 episodes, it's kind of like, yeah, he's grown, where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna put what Mob wants. I mean, especially because Mob is doing this, he has his goal in mind. He's trying to ask out the girl he likes. Like, and after everything we've been through these past 2 episodes and our relationship being better, I want to stop, not be as selfish, and I want to look out for Mob and go for what he wants. And especially all that he's done to try and change, how can I stomp on that and try and stifle that more than I've already done. My thing is to let him like spread his wings. So even though Regan hasn't really exercised himself, he goes out to help Mob, and they're exercising together. It's really beautiful. Risu finds out, which we also find out Risu has a very complicated relationship with Tsubomi, because he's like, when we were kids, he's like, I always know my brother liked her, but it's like, she's always kind of hard to deal with, in my opinion, because he was like, when like she would literally leave and go home in the middle of hide and seek. So once again, I don't know, because obviously Mob is basing a lot of who he is, trying to impress Tsubomi, based on like her getting bored of him when he was a kid, when they were kids. And it's like he hasn't been around her like in any like that's him as a kid holding on to that trauma. And same thing for Risu. It's like you haven't been around her as you've gotten older. That was years ago. So who knows like if she's that same person, but he's got his own trauma, and also he's trying to defend and look after his brother. So, but yeah, he's even doing the dishes for his brother because he knows how much like Mob is like working out and stuff. So him and Taruki were going to cover for Mob shifts at the office, and then lo and behold, 2 of the clients that walk in is a girl, was it Miki and Tsubomi. It's like, so Miki's there for like love advice, and I love the reason why Risu is hiding, because he's like, I don't want Tsubomi to know my brother is associated with such a shady place, because that could like shoot him in the foot where any opportunity of anything happening between them. And like what was it? At first he was giving Miki advice about, because she wants to date someone, and he's telling her like, oh, don't ask the guy out. And then you see Tsubomi looking, and she's looking at the client board and the photos and stuff, and there is the one photo that's got Regan and Mob in it. And so she asked Regan her own question. She's like, yeah, there's a guy I like from cram school and stuff like that. I figured at first, I was like, she's got to be BSing this, because she definitely saw the photo of Mob. I thought she was talking about Mob while not talking about Mob, in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to bring up Mob, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to change some facts. Because she was like, oh, we met at cram school. I was like, well, no, we know that you and Mob met as kids, but I'm like, well, could it be that you met in cram school when you were kids? Because I think cram schools exist as kids. I mean, once again, I know nothing about the school system in Japan, so but I'd assume there are cram schools even for kids. I mean, obviously there are middle schoolers and there are cram schools. You know, once again, that could be ignorance on my part, but she was saying all this stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, we talk all the time. He walks me home. I was like, I figured she was saying like everything Mob wasn't, just to kind of hide the fact that she was talking about Mob. And then Regan was telling her like, oh, go date the dude, which Risu's pissed off, because he's like, no, you idiot, because you don't realize this is the girl that you're trying to help Mob impress, and you're telling her to say yes, to go ahead and ask out the dude that she's talking about, even though we find out the dude's not real. But at the time, you can understand Risu's stress about it. But it turns out Tsubomi was doing all that to test him. It's like, oh yeah, there was no like cram school thing. Like, I just lied about all that, because she's like, I didn't want you to get taken advantage of. Any other situation, you would be right, because he is a con artist and everything like that. And she, even with everything that's going down with Regan recently, she probably was still like, I'm not sure. Even with everything and his reputation being restored a little bit, Tsubomi's smart enough to probably be like, yeah, but there were still those inklings of maybe there's BS involved here. And so it's like, oh, like I just said all that just to make sure you weren't getting scammed or anything. And Miki's like, well, what do you think about him? And she's like, well, all the stuff he said wasn't wrong, so he seems okay. And I'm like, oh, she's purely basing that all on like, she was helping out Miki in the regards of like, well, if Mob knows him, then he can't be all bad. So either it's like, either she doesn't, might not know that he works there. She might think like, oh, he was a customer here. And it's like, if Mob was willing to come here and be a customer in this guy, not knowing that Mob actually just full-time works there, then she's like, well, if Mob, regardless of it, Mob trusts him, so Shigeo trusts him, then I'm going to trust him. So, which is kind of really sweet, which I think kind of showcases like she has a high opinion of like Shigeo. Like she's like, if Shigeo trusts you, I'm gonna trust you. But either way, training continues, everyone putting in their effort, and he's getting advice from different people. The body improvement club is like laying stuff out about technique and stuff, and he's, everyone's helping out in whatever way they can, and it's really beautiful. Once again, the system of people around Mob who want the best for him, it's really sweet and beautiful. And so when it comes to the day of the marathon, he's a little shaky, he's a little nervous, but we see that he is wearing the shoes, and even Onigawara is like, yeah, but you can tell he's putting some work in those shoes because they're scuffed up. It's like he's really been trying his best. And Musashi's like, nah, you got this. Like, today we're rivals and we're going to see this through, And so Shigeo does his thing, but early on in the race, he kind of falls behind and gets scraped up. I also love, really quickly, Tomei chewing out the rest of the telepathy club who are all playing sick. But she's like, you idiots, you need to run. Stop being lazy. I mean, Mob is here putting in work. The least you can do is try. So yeah, but Mob ends up falling and he ends up hurting his leg, but he still has like Dimple beside him, and Dimple's like, oh, I could possess you and stuff like that, but Mob's like, no, he doesn't say anything, but Dimple knows like, nah, the look on his face, he wouldn't want that. And so the whole getting hurt thing kind of took its toll on him, and so Mob was kind of strained. Even his parents are like, well, we might as well watch from like partway through the race, and obviously not expect him at the finish line. But then they look at Mob and they see he's hurt, but for them it's like, no, but look at our son, he's got so much guts. And even runs past Tsubomi, and Tsubomi's about to wish him luck, but then I think she stops herself because she sees like, oh, like he doesn't need that, like just he's in the zone and he's focusing, and so she doesn't, like, she stops herself because I think for her it's like for Mob, that would have made his world, but he was still focused on his goal, which she is the goal, but it's like you can't see the forest for the trees, right? So it's the thing of like he's so focused that it's like he wasn't, and I think maybe she picked up on that, not knowing it's about her, but still, like she didn't want to mess him out of his flow of like, yeah, he's focused. And honestly, Mob did fantastic, dude. Like, I mean, obviously we see in the end he doesn't finish the race, sadly. They never say anything, but it kind of seems like, yeah, partway through it, he ended up passing out. He was on the last kilometer. Dude, he was 74th at the time. It's like, yeah, the other 10 are like so far ahead, you're never going to catch up. And I love that Dimple's like, oh, do you want to take a taxi? And Regan's like, I thought about it, but it's like, no, we can't do that. Look at the determination. That's amazing. In a year, he went from like 291st to 74th. That is fantastic for Mob. And it was like, he should be proud of that. He probably would have felt even, I mean, obviously his goal was 10 because he feels like this was his one shot, because he thinks like, oh, I won't have time to really put in all that effort next year. So that's why this year had to count. But all the training he's done in the body improvement club, all the training he's done leading up to the marathon, to get to 74th, even if he didn't finish, that in itself is an accomplishment and it shows growth. But it's sad that he didn't get to even finish the race. They say later on, it's like, oh, it might have been like mild anemia. He ended up passing out. But yeah, his teacher tells him when he wakes up in the infirmary, like, hey, don't push yourself too far. But he's like, you used to seem a bit glum, but lately you've seemed a lot brighter. It's like, yes, because so much has changed. Mob has changed himself so much. And it makes you really proud. You're like, oh man, look at this character growth. And I think sometimes Mob doesn't always recognize it in himself, but others have started noticing it. So yeah, sadly, the religious group did not get their savior like they wanted to. Really quickly, I love that whole thing of when Masato was trying to pitch it to him. She's like, yeah, your fans. He's like, ooh, fans? And then she's like, religious group. He's like, oh, religious group. It kind of took the wind out of the sails for the whole situation. But yeah, you didn't really get too much from Mob in that perspective in the aftermath of all of that. But he should be proud of himself. But I think it's still like a thing of, I mean, we don't see him beating himself up about it. He kind of just says like, "Ah, oh, damn it, it happened." But I don't think he's really taking in like how much because I think it's like, well, I DNF'd, I didn't finish, but I think there's also getting as far as you did was a heavy improvement considering like every time we've ever seen you, even with the Body Improvement Club, you'd always pass out after a while. Like we also find out like, well, because the thing he mainly took away from it all was, oh my God, my brother made ninth. That's amazing. That's all he cared about. Because for Shigeo, for Mob, it's like, no, like who cares about me? My brother did awesome. That's great. He's always more proud of Risu's accomplishments and not recognizing his own accomplishments, So, like I said, I think that's why he's not beating himself up on it because he's focused on like, oh, Risu did good. So either way, back at home, like his parents had cooked, like his mom had made a good meal because she was like, yeah, I got to do something, make something yummy for my boy who's like really trying real hard. And ultimately, Risu goes to answer the door thinking it's Shigeo, and it turns out to be Sho. I think that's his name, from Claw, the dude who showed up, the kid. And he's like, oh, you're here? And like, oh, your parents are here. And he kind of looks a little scary. But then like Mob rushes there and finds his house is on fire. But he's like, no. Dad got off work early just to see me run. So like, yeah, he would have been prepared, and Mom's careful, so she wouldn't have been, leaving the stove on. And it's like, Risu is super strong. My family's capable. So he's like, I know that they must have already left by now. But then it's like Dimple tells him like there was signs of a struggle at the front of entrance, and it's like maybe someone took him, and he opens a door and he sees bodies or something burning, and Dimple's telling him close his eyes not to look, but it like Mob was already entering in 90%, and then he snaps and goes into the question marks and start unleashing his powers because he's thinking his family's dead. That's what he was concerned about, worried about, but he's like, no, my family's good, my family's okay. So either there's no way his family and Risu are dead. It's either one, those are the like fake illusions, which we've had to deal, they've dealt with an illusion person from Claw before, or it's which I think is the most likely thing, just based on the intro too. I don't think, like I said, I could be wrong, but I think his name is Sho. Because I'm remembering it as Sho, but it could be something else. I don't think based on the intro, I don't think he's a bad guy. I think some members of Claw, specifically the Scars from last season, I think are coming back as good guys. I mean, hell, even the guy helped out Mob and Regan back during that whole I think it was episode 5. Like he was there for 4 and 5, but he was there to help out in the end in episode 5. So yeah, the Scars aren't going to be like the bad guys because of like I think all the stuff that Regan said to them last season struck a chord. But I think Sho showed up because even Risu was like, "How did you know where we lived?" It's like what? Because he said, like, "Oh, I told you I'd find you one point in time," but it's like, why now? So I think what's probably happening is someone was coming after Risu and Risu and Mob's family, and I think either the bodies that, like I said, those were either fake or Sho defeated or killed the people that showed up here trying to hurt his family. I think that's who's burning in the house. That's my thought. Like I said, I don't believe for a second that his family's gone. But we'll have to wait to see what the revelation is. Because I think Sho is like going up against Claw. Maybe even like him and his dad are against Claw now. Or maybe he's just kind of being rebellious against. Because we saw that him and his dad did not have the best relationship last season. Or in the season finale. So we'll have to wait to see where this goes. What the revelation ends up being. But I'm very excited to see where this next episode takes us. Kind of that hard turn in this episode where it's like, oh yeah, 90% of this episode's all fun and like hopeful and yeah, and it hits you with that right hook all of a sudden, gut punch. So, but really that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.